suit getting hot yet?
I'm going to go change.
I'll give you some time. So, let me grab the little clicker. So that was amazing. And now we are going to try to bring it back to earth, but it won't feel like it. So I'm Bill Schwebel. I'm with Johnson Controls. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of our Global Building Automation Systems and Controls Group, which is really at the core of Johnson Controls, is the core of what we do. These are the brands that we represent. Cochrane represents a lot of those brands, except for Metasys and Penn, and maybe someday they will. But these are definitely our flagship building automation and controls brands. And we also have your Cochrane solutions as well, electromechanical systems. And then we have Envirotech, our clean air solutions. So we have a very broad portfolio. Cochrane is one of our most important partners, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that all works out. I came to this industry 3 years ago, and I am one of those digital transformation executives. I've gone through the digital transformation that we saw in retail and warehousing, especially through the pandemic with Zebra Technologies. Before that, I worked in the connected car space. Worked in a consortium of companies, started with Microsoft to launch the first connected car, Ford Sync, and now, of course, you see where connected cars have gone in a fairly short amount of time. Ford Sync launched in 2010, and then prior to that, I worked in the internet space. And believe it or not, the internet was analog at one point, and it didn't really go digital until about the year 2000 with broadband and those capabilities. You used to dial up to get to the internet, if you can believe that. But so that's my background, and I'm bringing that into the smart building space. And it's been quite a journey over the past 3 years, and quite a team. So Johnson Controls, just to set some context, I'm sure most of you have heard of the company, but in its current form, all we do is building technologies, and primarily commercial building technologies, which is about 82% of our revenue comes from commercial building technologies in the HVAC, controls, fire, and security space. And it's a global business. We operate pretty much everywhere. And it's really focused on providing the solutions. And that's where we partner with Cochrane on providing these solution capabilities to all of the integrators. And as we see the evolution of the technologies and the solutions, we see a lot more coming up through software. And if you look at the HVAC controls on the field devices, et cetera, you look at the building automation systems, the digital and connected service enablement, and the enterprise software, those things are really coming together to provide the smart building platform. And it's not unique to any one supplier. It's not unique to any one customer or any one technology, because this stuff is all in all the buildings. You look around the room here, and any given building probably has a little bit of all this technology in it. And the real challenge for our industry is bringing that all together. Now, Niagara Framework gives us one of the ways to do that. And the Niagara Framework is what powers our Facility Explorer building automation system. And it provides that capability and that common set of tools and that common framework, A, for interconnectivity, and B, to manage the workflows. So we did some research, and we talked to 3,400 decision makers across 18 industries in 25 countries, really to understand what does smart buildings mean to them. And it's really, of course, this convergence, and Jim talked about it, and this convergence of data. You need to have data to be able to process things, and it's that convergence of data across all those systems. But what all these leaders said was their systems are not fully integrated. And that's really impeding their operating efficiencies. It's impeding their customer loyalty. It's causing regulatory penalties because they have things that are not compliant, that they thought were compliant, that aren't connected. It impacts their revenue, and it impacts their brand reputation. And some of that connectivity comes through, and this lack of connectivity comes through, for example, the cybersecurity issue. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of those things in a minute. But if these systems aren't integrated, every one of them could be exposed as a cybersecurity threat. And we're talking to customers now. They don't want to put servers in their buildings anymore. That is such a threat plane for them that they don't want servers in their building. They don't want compute exposed like that in their building. So it's rapidly changing, and Jim talked about how quick this is happening. Also, the majority say that adding or upgrading building automation really helps them support their energy, carbon reduction, and their energy goals. So what are these challenges? And we've all heard these, and you're probably feeling this, and you know, how does this, you know, impact all of us? And number one is this talent shortage. And it's pretty interesting to see. I just got exposed. Jim talked about, the Sinclair talked about the Azure Copilot, and how Copilot's now sitting next to all of our coders. So Microsoft runs a platform called GitHub. GitHub is the world's largest source code repository. Copilot sees all that software code and is now helping software developers create code. So we're going to see a rapid shift in the types of functions that we used to have and into new types of functions. So where the talent shortage is really impacting us are the people in the field and the people actually working on the buildings. That's the most acute area. You can't replicate that capability, that physical capability with the systems we have today without some of the smart building sorts of tools. So this digitalization is also a big challenge. If you think of somebody that came up through the industry in the analog world and they're very comfortable with analog, they can troubleshoot analog, they can, you know, take care of issues in analog. All of a sudden now it's digitalization. We saw, you know, getting the Teams call going, right? That's a digital function. You need, excuse me, you need an IT expert to troubleshoot that issue. In days gone by, a more mechanically oriented analog person could have handled that problem. So as you move into digitalization, it changes the skill sets, it changes the issues, and the speed at which things happen, and the speed at which things can go wrong. So in a digital world, things can go wrong very quickly, and they don't work. I had an issue with my car recently where the fuel lid didn't stop working. The actuator actually went out on the fuel lid. I didn't even know it had one. And you couldn't operate the car. The car would not run because I couldn't open the fuel lid. So I had to take a screwdriver and open it, and thank God I could put fuel in it and drive the car. But that's where digital goes wrong. Equipment optimization. There's a lot of equipment out there, and a lot of equipment, I'll say almost all of it, is not fully optimized. You look at any building, you look at any system, you see issues with that system. It works okay. It's not something I'm going to deal with today. Maybe it's a low priority. But once you get visibility to that building, you realize how poorly it's performing and how poorly it's operating. And that actually, knowing about it creates more problems, because now you know that you're operating at 50% efficiency or 75% efficiency, et cetera. The other area, and I'm going to talk more about this, is building performance across the full life cycle. If you think of the stakeholders in a building, they really only care about their piece and maybe the next piece, because the next piece can yell at them and say, hey, address that piece. But if you look at the full life cycle, if you look at the systems that we're providing, the solution providers in this room, we're really providing solutions to enable those steps in the life cycle. I'm going to talk more about that. But the building has to perform across that full life cycle. And we do talk about digital, and you look at, and I'm always amazed, you know, coming from the digital tech world, and I walk into a building that's 5 years old. And that building owner thinks that building is brand new, shiny. And I'm looking at it like, oh my God, it's 5 years old, it has previous gen equipment on it, et cetera, et cetera. We've got to upgrade this building, and they think it's still brand new. So that's certainly things that we need to address in this life cycle. We need to do a better job, frankly, about how we support the building life cycle. And especially if you think about, you know, for example, in New York City, the average building is 80 years old, and some of the original building systems are still in those buildings. Budget and financing. This is definitely an acute issue in a lot of the international markets, but you think of budget, which is really your OpEx and your costs, and then financing around your CapEx and how all that works. And you know, cash flow and inflation and all of those things are impacting our industry, impacting our customers especially. And then the risk of cyber attack. I talked about that exposed server that's in a building, and you don't want to be the one to get that phone call that said your system was hacked, right? And especially if it's a critical environment, which a lot of us operate in, we need to do everything we can as an industry to address those challenges. And a lot of the solutions we're talking about helps us with those issues. So we talked about this notion of this smart building going to this autonomous building. And once that building gets connected, so you get it integrated and you get it connected, now you can start to apply things like artificial intelligence. You can apply remote monitoring. Just imagine 1 million connected buildings managed by artificial intelligence and people that are remote to the building helping out anticipate the types of issues with the building. So that's what we're seeing now. So in Johnson Controls, for example, we ship a chiller. We're connecting that chiller, and it's attached to the cloud, and it's attached to these specialists in the cloud that help the local service techs, the local integrators, et cetera, deal with those issues. That makes this journey to the autonomous building, it's a way to enable that journey. At some point, that building won't need that human in the cloud or won't need some of those special processes and some of that special data gathering. The system will start working on its own the way a lot of other systems that are in, I talked about the automotive situation where the car is pretty autonomous, right? We're starting to see that journey happening with autonomous buildings. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this, and I talked about this life cycle, and I've addressed this a little bit in the past as well. But we're really getting a lot more clarity, especially as we look at some of the solutioning that we're doing in Europe, we're doing in China, we're doing in North America, about the importance of this and how these systems are all really different. But fundamentally, from a platform capabilities perspective, there's a lot of similarities. So, of course, everything starts out with the engineering, and there's some engineering folks in the room, system integrators, et cetera, the contractor, and this notion and this panacea of getting to zero engineering. So imagine, being able to go into a system with zero engineering and have it become with zero commissioning, have it become operational with none of that upfront work, none of that programming sort of work, et cetera. And what are some of the technologies required to do that? Your unified tool chain, plug and play, single source of truth around the data. We've seen other industries do this. The internet in your home or cable TV, remember that, that analog cable TV, which is now digital, and how that's all plug and play, your mobile device. It used to take hours, almost a day, to program your mobile phone, right? Now you walk into AT&T or Verizon, pick up your phone. As you're walking out the door, it's programming, and it's updating to everything you had on your prior phone without you having to do anything. And that's the type of technology that's coming into the building space. And the zero commissioning, this notion, and you think about all of the stress in that commissioning cycle, right? The project's late, the tenants are coming in, the building needs to be complete, we need that certificate of occupancy, and that commissioning step today is very important. And it's a very important step to make sure that all the systems are validated and I can turn that building over. And imagine the capability where that gets very simplified. You still probably will have commissioning validation by a human that checks the box, but a lot of that work becomes a lot more streamlined when you have these more singular environments that are interworked and interoperable, fully digital, remote capabilities into those buildings, and very continuous sort of activity around that commissioning as things change in the building, that commissioning activity. The autonomous operations, and that's really the real these building owners, facility managers, the panacea of smart facility management, et cetera, where I can self-manage my building, right? And I can take relatively low technical capability people and do some of the plug and play, manage the building, manage that building on more of an autonomous basis, and bring in the specialists when I need them. So, and when those specialists come in, they have the information about what the problem is. It's not, and maybe they can even do it remotely, right? So those of us in the room, we could actually service that building. We don't have to do a truck roll to service that building in that aided autonomous environment. And then finally, future-proof. As you look at the pain of a retrofit, how do you make that a much simpler sort of endeavor? Over-the-air updates, et cetera. Those are all the things that we look at in the retrofit realm. And then what are these enablers, right? The connected assets, this single source of truth. Every device being connected, every device being able to wake up and talk to the internet about who I am and become configured. This master data infrastructure and the data semantics, we're seeing a lot of advances, and Stephen will talk a little bit more today about some of those things that we're seeing about this critical element. We can't really manage the building if you can't describe it in data. And it's been probably the biggest Achilles heel for the smart building has been dealing with how do we name all of these, all this equipment, all these points in all these spaces. And then having the flexibility in the architecture. So where do I put the capabilities? It shouldn't really matter. Do I put it in the device on the wall? Do I put it in a controller near the equipment? Do I put it at one source in the building? Do I put it in the cloud? It really shouldn't matter where a lot of this capability goes, and having that flexibility. And then in order to have all these systems work together, the openness. And BACnet, thankfully we have BACnet and Modbus, et cetera, but we're going to have to push those standards more to do what we need to do in the autonomous building space with artificial intelligence, et cetera. And then finally, the most important thing, ensuring we're safe and compliant and the cybersecurity. And it really, what does it drive? The TCO is total cost of ownership. Ultimately, that's what the customers care about. All of this stuff that goes into a building, all of our technology, all of the work we do as suppliers, as integrators, et cetera, is really to drive better total cost of ownership. And a lot of it comes down to workforce enablement. We're targeting 1 million workers in buildings to really enable with this capability. And really start to address how workers are working on the buildings. One of the great things we have in this industry through the Niagara framework is the workbench capability. So a lot of our workers understand how to interact with our building automation systems. Occupant well-being, and that gets back to the revenue piece, a lot of the issues, and it was certainly heightened awareness through the pandemic, but that's a critical element, and people are very sensitive now to what well-being means for an occupant in a building. Energy efficiency goes unsaid, but clearly a major issue, and then, as I mentioned, the compliance. So what do we see? And what are we working on? And really we've talked about this flattening of the architecture, but really you have your equipment and your field devices on the edge. You have some sort of edge control, and that edge control, as I mentioned, can live anywhere. It can live on the device itself. It can live on the equipment. We're working on mechanical equipment that has full BAS capability from the factory. So you don't have to add to it. So it's the dream of factory package controls per se. And so that edge control that starts to be anywhere. You could do that from the cloud. You could do it anywhere in the building, and then all of these capabilities in the software applications and services layer. So that software and that data becoming critically important. So when we start talking about the industry on these planes, it's different than the way we've traditionally thought about the industry in much more of a hierarchical form in the, coming from our analog past. And the focus of our efforts are on these 3 planes, doing really well with the field devices, and ensuring that those field devices have become digitally enabled and become plug and play, and maybe even have some of that edge control. That edge control being more fluid. And this edge control is probably the area where most of the work needs to be done. Because traditionally that edge control, those field controllers, have been fairly simplistic devices, running fairly simplistic, and I don't want to offend anybody, but fairly simplistic control that kind of just keeps doing what it's doing year after year after year. That's changing. In the world of AI, that's changing. That's probably the area, because the software layer, this stuff has been these software capabilities, industries have been, writing cloud native software for 20 years. So that's all I had. And thank you for considering us. Jonathan Lewis is here. He'll be up with Scott tomorrow, and Randy Elvis back runs our relationship with all our partners through Cochrane Supply. So check us out.
Yeah, Bill, before you go, just a quick question. I think the autonomous building conversation is fascinating. Do you feel like that's something like you and I are going to see in our career, just from your viewpoint at Johnson? I mean, is this something, how fast could this come to be a reality?
I think within 5 years,
Okay.
It's going to be the norm.
Really?
Yeah, and I think it's going to happen as fast. Remember in 2007 when the smartphone came out?
Yeah.
And by 2010, that's all everybody had.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So we're crossing the chasm. So crossing the chasm means when 15% of buildings get connected, you cross that chasm, and we're close to that.
Gotcha. And Johnson Controls, you guys are also, arguably the largest contractor in the space of BAS. How do you see the role of that contracting entity changing as this autonomous, building becomes a reality?
So Johnson Controls, like you said, one of the largest mechanical contractors, and we are seeing this shift, right? We want the ecosystem to handle the local work more and more, and then we're focusing our efforts on these cloud solution capabilities. And then what needs to happen is the business models need to change and the go-to-market models need to change so that everybody can take advantage of those capabilities. Today, a lot of those capabilities are locked within Johnson Controls. Our challenge is how to open it up to the industry so that you can use the pieces of that capability that you want.
Yeah. Very interesting. And then going back to that autonomous building conversation, Johnson Controls also a leader in the security space, life safety. Could you speak, are those following the same trend you feel like as BAS? Are they going to go with it? Are they going to stay separate? What's your thinking there?
So first off, all this technology is happening in the fire space. It's happening in the security space for sure. And security is one of these domains, very locked. Proprietary, don't let anybody in it. The fire detection space, definitely, similar. But they're all using the same technology, and they all use similar sorts of installation, integration, go-to-market. It's different domains, but they're using a lot of the similar things. And we're seeing it come from, of course, you already have it in the home, right? We're seeing that happen very quickly in small, medium enterprises, right? Not a space that we've traditionally in the BAS control space have been playing, but all of those buildings need these capabilities. So we're seeing that convergence come from the bottom up. And it's pretty similar to the way you see technology roll out today, right? The smartphone started as a consumer device.
Sure.
Right, and it took enterprise, it used to happen the other way,
Yeah.
right? Enterprises had the technology first.
Right.
And now consumers get it first.
Sure.
So this convergence has already happened in the home, right? And it's now happening in small and medium enterprises. It's going to be in all commercial buildings at some point.
And it makes sense because it does save money in operations. And as we get into more cybersecurity related situations, it makes more sense there. Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely headed that way.
Imagine you're doing 100% of your work on your mobile phone.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Okay, great. Well, Bill, thank you so much. Well done.
Thank you.